Hello, I'm Wayne Newton, and this is my town, Las Vegas, Nevada. And I've seen it go through more changes than the chorus line at Bally's. But this place still sparkles at night, and the spirit of Las Vegas is still unlike anywhere else in the whole world. Years ago, high rollers, mobsters, and even politicians used to pal around together in this adult-only playground. For a few years at the dawn of the 1960s, 5 men were at the center of it all.
Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, and they're all on stage at the same time.
They were called the Rat Pack, a gang of performers at the top of their game. They convened in Las Vegas to film a movie and ended up making history.
They wheeled out a room service cart full of booze, and they went up on stage and they ad-libbed the show.
Frank and his famous pals drew legions of fans, among them some of the most powerful people in the country.
Frank wanted to be the best buddy to the president, and all of them went out and performed and entertained and did what they could to get Kennedy elected.
As well as some of the most feared men in organized crime.
The mobs had their own set of laws and rules. They did it the way they wanted, and that's the way Frank liked to live.
In the next hour, we will venture inside the world of the Rat Pack. We'll go backstage to see the real show.
I've seen gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous women. The average guy would have killed himself for those women.
And dispel some of the myths behind the bad boy antics.
I looked over and I saw this Martinelli's apple juice, and that's what Dean used on stage, creating this image that he was a drunk.
We will follow the Rat Pack beyond Vegas to see the heartbreak and struggle that followed the party.
He was not that sexy, bouncy, all-wise kind of wonderful gentleman. The twinkle was gone.
We will explore the Rat Pack's swinging stomping grounds and look at the glitzy new Vegas that has taken its place.
You got a tiger running across the stage and an elephant in the back trying to get on the stage too. That'll cost you $90. I used to go to a circus, only cost me $3.
This is the story of a city dedicated to all American excess and the men who made it that way.
Everybody envied them because they were able to do anything they wanted and get away with it, and this is what every man would have loved to have done, to be able to live that kind of a life.
This is the story of the Rat Pack, the true Hollywood story.
The dream of being one of them.
From life's ambition was to be a star.
Never recovers the public scandal.
I'll never forget that day, November 1996. It was cold, clear, and bittersweet. The legendary Sands Hotel was demolished to make way for a magnificent new property called the Venetian Hotel. The implosion of the Sands marked the end of an era, but the memory of what happened there lives on. The stage at the Sands Hotel was once home to the legendary set of concerts by the notorious Rat Pack.
Hey, how all these people get in my room?
The Rat Pack was the personification of cool, the embodiment of the ring-a-ding hepcat culture of the 1950s. Their ringleader was the most famous crooner in the world, Old Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra.
I don't know, but it's kind of fun to stand out on the floor all by yourself with a little band like this and a couple of hundred aficionados out there in the audience.
A former band vocalist, Frank burst into stardom during World War II. Sinatra biographer J. Randy Taraborelli.
Frank was never a great-looking guy. He was always a very thin, gawky, unusual-looking person from Hoboken who was not the kind of man that you would expect to be an idol of hundreds of thousands of women across this country. But what he did have was an amazing charisma. He had a great sexual energy about him.
Former president of Capitol Records, Alan Livingston.
His signature was the interpretation of the song, and if it hit a chord with him or a note with him or reflected on his feelings or his life, that was the kind of thing he liked to do best. He understood a song, and when he sang it, he believed it. He was telling you a story.
And the stories he told made the men smile and the women swoon. former showgirl Charlotte Nort.
When he looked at you with those eyes, they were mesmerizing. You'd never know he had a nerve in his body. I mean, he was cool as a cucumber, and the women loved him.
Sinatra's career had the drama of a soap opera. He was up, he was down, but he always came back. Rat Pack co-author William Scholl.
He'd almost become a has-been. His records stopped selling. The teeny boppers of the period went on to new singers and new types of music. He was washed up in pictures. He had made too many enemies. And then it all turned around for him when he got cast in From Here to Eternity.
As Maggio, a tough Italian soldier, Sinatra scored Hollywood's biggest prize, the Oscar. The buzz reignited his singing career, and by the mid-1950s, he was back on top. So were his friends. Frank's closest crony was fellow Italian singer Dean Martin. Blessed with a velvet throat, Martin was as laid back as they come. Daughter, Dina Martin.
If something happened, just take it and go on and make the best of it. That was the way Dad lived. I mean, that was really, he didn't really think about things very deeply. I mean, he was sharp and intelligent and he was quick. I mean, I've never known anyone as quick as he is.
Dino, as Frank called him, became a star in the early 1940s when he teamed with an energetic comic named Jerry Lewis. After the duo split up in 1956, Dean's star continued climbing.
It all happened for him because he had the looks, he had the voice, and he had the style and the manner, and the ability to do whatever was required of him. But he never worked at it.
Dean's former wife, Jeanne Martin.
He was a very, very classy man. Besides being the coolest man, he put another O in cool.
In Sinatra's world, cool was like currency. You had to have style, grace, and talent to run with Frank. Sammy Davis Jr. had all three. Former press agent Jay Bernstein.
I've seen Sammy do shows that were supposed to be 55 minutes that would go 3 hours if he felt he hadn't gotten everyone in the room to love him. Because that was his goal, was for everybody to love Sammy Davis Jr.
The son of a chorus girl and a vaudeville performer, Sammy had performing in his blood. He was a one-man dynamo, singer, dancer, impressionist. Davis overcame racial oppression and physical hardships to succeed. Sammy and Frank, different as night and day, became fast friends. Rat Pack co-author Lawrence Quirk.
Many negative things have been said about Frank, but he was basically on the side of the underdog, and he abhorred mistreatment, bullying, racial prejudice, and that was a bond between him and Sammy.
Sinatra surrounded himself with men who had something to offer, and at the dawn of the 1960s, he wanted someone with political affiliations. Enter Peter Lawford, a reserved and charming British actor who married into the Kennedy political dynasty. With a young senator named John F. Kennedy for a brother-in-law, Peter found himself welcome in Sinatra's world, even if Lawford was never a perfect fit.
Peter was, unfortunately, a sensitive, rather delicate-spirited man who didn't have the tough macho qualities that the others did, and I never felt really at ease with them.
The last of the Rat Pack was a quick-witted comedian named Joey Bishop. Bishop's sharp comic timing was his ticket into the club.
The first engagement that I worked with Frank Sinatra was Bill Miller's Riviera in Fort Lee, New Jersey. I did not know the stage revolved. And Frank pushed the button. And as I came around, there was Frank in the wings doing this. So I thought, well, he'll turn it off when I come around, right? He didn't. I came around, okay? The next time I came around, I said, place your bets, folks. I don't think I'm coming around again.
Sinatra referred to himself and his friends as the Clan, but the name that stuck was the Rat Pack.
Frank had his hand in everything. He was amazing that way. He could produce, he could, I mean, you name it, Frank could do it. And he loved staying up late and having fun. So he was actually the logical one to put that whole thing together.
I had just come here at the age of 15 years old, and little did I know that these legends would end up being friends of mine. Frank had a deal with Warner Brothers that allowed him to cast his buddies in Ocean's 11, a heist tale set in Las Vegas. January 1960, the Rat Pack converged upon the city to gamble, sing, party, and of course, if they had time, shoot a movie.
Coming up.
The party began in the room when these performers came on stage. Everyone in the audience participated.
And later,
Frank Sinatra was always intrigued by gangsters.
I was honored to be a good friend of Frank Sinatra and the rest of the Rat Pack. Those guys were as important to Las Vegas as neon lights and poker chips. And when they roared onto the Strip in January of 1960, these five swingers created their own brand of atomic age cool. And the rest of the world stopped to watch the party.
Las Vegas already had a reputation as a playground for adults. Built with mob money, the resort town attracted high rollers and tourists with equal amounts of sparkle and sin. Vegas was a ready-made showcase for the Rat Pack. Author Bert Boyer.
Frank Sinatra got a big movie contract, and the first picture he was going to make was going to be Ocean's 11, and it was going to be shot in Las Vegas.
The plot was about a bunch of guys whose paths in life have gone downhill since they were in the Army, and they decide they're going to rob all the casinos in Las Vegas on the same night.
Entertainer Al Martino.
It was Frank's project, and he put that project together. So no one was going to argue with him because it was his idea.
Sinatra earmarked roles for his famous friends, and Ocean's 11, starring Frank, Dean, Sammy, Peter, and Joey, was set to go before the cameras. With so many big names in town to shoot the movie, one enterprising casino manager couldn't resist putting them on stage. Columnist James Bacon.
Jack and Trotter, who was the impresario there at the Sands Hotel, wanted Dean, Sammy, and Frank to appear.
Sinatra knew and Trotter from his days at New York's Copacabana Club. Frank saw the chance to combine a series of high-profile club dates with his star-studded movie production. Hollywood producer George Shlatter.
So he talked to all of his pallies, you know, Dean and Sammy and Peter Lawford and Joey Bishop. He said, look, we're all going to be in the movie, so why don't we go into the Sands Hotel and one of us will do a show each night. A different one each night will do the show. And we can work during the day. One guy does the show at night. We can hang out. We got a place to go. So they said, great.
In January 1960, Ocean's 11 began shooting in Las Vegas. But the real show took place every night at the Sands Hotel.
Opening night, they were all on stage together. And they wheeled out a room service cart full of booze. And they went up on stage and they ad-libbed the show. There was no rehearsal. There was no preparation. It was Sammy came out, Dean came out, and they interrupted each other.
So well, it turned out that all five of them, every night, were on the stage. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, and they're all on stage at the same time.
The Rat Pack shared the stage for a series of memorable performances dubbed The Summit. The shows drew in crowds of gamblers, tourists, and fellow entertainers, and was the hottest ticket in the country.
They were just riotous. They had a party, and everybody was invited, you know, that could get into that room. And it was just their party. And they didn't work to the audience. They didn't, you know, they didn't care.
The party began in the room when these performers came on stage. Everybody, everyone in the audience participated, and they couldn't laugh any harder than what they did.
Well, what is this here? There happens to be a little food. Little food, F-U-D. We're doing 6 shows a night here. We're hungry. How many? Well, 2 here, 4 in the room. That's 6, Daddy. I don't care where you count it.
It was a bunch of pallies who were having a pretty good time. It wasn't really about music. It was about entertainment. These guys would go on stage, and they were dynamite together.
Former Sands Bell captain Lou Pearl.
There was a party every single show. There was no question about it. The people, the public in this town will never, ever relax like they did there.
Part of what made it so memorable was that you were watching 5 big stars who had gold records and pictures and movies and everything, who none of them needed to be there, but all of them wanted to be there.
As the infamous Summit at the Sands raged every night, production on Ocean's 11 continued during the day.
The director, Louis Milestone, he was a friend of theirs, and he knew that Sinatra was boss. He knew they weren't going to show up till noon, so he did the other actors in the morning and They would just show up hungover and have a good time.
The only trouble was sometimes with Frank. He, depending on if he's having a good day or a bad day, you know. He was a man of many moods. If he felt like working, they came out and worked. He'd come out and work. If he didn't, he had a reason, whatever that reason might be.
For the Rat Pack, their work on the big screen was fun, but the movie was secondary. As filming on Ocean's 11 wound down, the fever pitch created by their shows at the Sands lived on.
Each of them were capable of filling any club or theater in the world by themselves, but they chose to be there together. And so you knew you were seeing something that had never happened before, and if you thought about it, you knew it would never happen again.
You know, Frank and his pals probably wouldn't recognize the Strip today, but every time a new act becomes a Vegas fixture, they measure themselves against the shadow of the Rat Pack. Performance artist Blue Man Group have certainly had an impact on Las Vegas.
This town is used to people just sitting back, watching the show, not being a part of the show, and here we're really coming out to the people, getting them involved with what we're doing, because the goal of the show is to have one common experience. Part of our mission coming out here and opening up the show was to change Vegas.
Yeah, you think Rat Pack, you think Vegas.
Think Blue Man Group, think Vegas.
Coming up.
I really don't think they meant to be offensive towards blacks or women or anybody else. They just saw it as being irreverent as opposed to being racist.
Hi, and welcome back to the E! True Hollywood Story. I'm Wayne Newton. You know, the allure of Frank Sinatra and his Rat Pack still dominates today's Las Vegas. The old Blue Eyes show captures an older Sinatra, while the Rat Pack as back features the guys at their peak. Now, in 1960, the Rat Pack personified a freewheeling, decadent lifestyle that attracted men and captivated ladies.
Frank Sinatra's pet film project, Ocean's 11, premiered in Las Vegas with a star-studded block party in August 1960. The movie was a solid hit, grossing more than $10 million. Long after the picture wrapped, the Rat Pack continued to hold court in Vegas as their exploits drew the attention of the entire country. Sinatra's former publicist, Lee Salters.
Everybody envied them because they were able to do anything they wanted and get away with it, and this is what every man would have loved to have done. To be able to live that kind of a life.
Have all sorts of women, have no rules, have a great time. I think a lot of men, after they got married, were a little disappointed that they weren't having as much fun. So they wanted to be the Rat Pack, and the women wanted to date the Rat Pack or have their boyfriends be more like them.
When Frank and the boys got together, they cultivated a fraternity-like atmosphere. Women, booze, and jokes all flowed freely. But what they saw as good-natured ribbing, some considered offensive.
It was just their humor, like the one that Dean Martin always used.
I'd like to thank the NAACP for this wonderful trophy.
At one point in the same steam room, they brought Sammy a brown robe. So they were all wearing white robes. They brought Sammy a brown robe.
They were all equal to themselves. They were friends, and it wouldn't occur to them not to be able to joke with each other, you know, and to call Sammy whatever they wanted to. It never, ever entered their mind that he was anything other than their equal.
Have you forgotten the South? I'm trying to, baby. Yeah.
I really don't think they meant to be offensive towards blacks or women or anybody else. They just saw it as being irreverent as opposed to being racist.
While the Rat Pack reveled in risque humor, their true offstage pastimes were ladies and liquor.
I seen gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous women. When these two guys were walking out of the hotel, I seen women just stop in front of them and make them stop. I'm telling you, the average guy would have killed himself with those women. They were so beautiful.
Sinatra was always the de facto leader of the Rat Pack. Frank corralled the other members and played off their strengths and connections. Sammy Davis Jr., as tireless a partygoer as he was a performer, was an easy sell. But Dean Martin was harder to boss around.
Frank wanted Dean as part of his, quote, group. And Dean went along with it. But Dean was not really committed to Frank in the same way that Sammy Davis was, or some of the other Rat Pack. Dean was there, and he participated, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, if he'd had enough, he'd say, I'm going to the men's room, and disappear and go home. Nobody did that to Frank, except Dean, and get away with it.
Dean Martin was a very guarded and private man. Unlike the others, Dean saw his booze hound image as just that, a role to be played. Ocean's 11 co-star Henry Silva.
One day I happened to get into his dressing room and I saw this Martinelli's apple juice. And that's what Dean used on stage, creating this image that he was a drunk.
As controlling as Sinatra could be, he was just as complimentary. The man known as the chairman of the board valued the skills of the other Rat Packers, particularly those of Joey Bishop, their often overlooked comic foil.
When we did the Rat Pack show at the end of the act, he asked Joe and said, you enjoyed the show, they applauded. He put his arm around me, he says, well, let's give a little credit to the hub of the wheel.
Sinatra's appreciation for Peter Lawford was a little more transparent. Lawford allowed Frank to rub elbows with his powerful in-law, Senator John F. Kennedy.
Frank Sinatra had a great friendship with Jack Kennedy because they were two of a kind. Jack was fascinated by Hollywood. He loved the girls, he loved starlets, he even loved Hollywood gossip, and Frank Sinatra not only told him what was going on, who with what, but he also introduced him to a lot of beautiful Hollywood actresses, including most famously Marilyn Monroe.
Kennedy was a serious contender in the 1960 presidential race, and Sinatra, always jockeying for powerful, influential friends, saw an opportunity.
Frank wanted to be the best buddy to the president. He thought that would be really great and classy if his pal, his buddy, was president of the United States. So he went out and stumped for Kennedy, and he got all of the members of the Rat Pack to become the Jack Pack. And all of them went out and performed and entertained and did what they could to get Kennedy elected.